of silver linings that have come out of this time, and so glad that I can be here. Just to let you know, I have two screens going, so if it looks like I'm looking up into space, it's because I can see you better up on this upper screen. So that's what I'm looking at. Just to start, a couple of things. One, I'm doing what is normally an 8-hour training, and that's like the initial training, and trying to give you enough information so that you can feel it in an hour. So I'll do my best to move through it. Some suggestions for you. This is a very experiential sort of model. And so I know that there's probably a lot of people that aren't showing me your picture because you're working and you're typing up emails and doing all those things, because I'm definitely one of those people that put on trainings and continue on with my day. And I want to support you in doing what you need to do today, and also just let you know that it will be really hard to experience this model without actively participating in it, because part of it is a somatic body experience and working with our nervous system. And so we have to be able to tune into our nervous system to understand the model well. That's why I'm doing my first 8-hour training online right now. And this is the first online hour kind of intro, because it's just a model that's better done in person when you can kind of have everyone's attention. So again, if you want to let me see your face and that helps you stay engaged, I just want to support you in doing that as well. So just this first slide, just really quick, this model was co-created in the Trauma Resource Institute, which you can see at the bottom, was co-founded by Elaine Miller Harris. And one of the best parts about this, I love that it says it's accessible, affordable, portable, and adaptable. And as we'll talk about in the beginning part of this introduction, my favorite thing about this model is all of those things. It has to do with the human nervous system. So while it might be different, it's going to look different with different cultures, ethnicities, races, genders, people just in general. The way that it's so adaptable is because every human on the planet has a central nervous system that responds to stress, trauma, etc. And so it's very adaptable. It's affordable, meaning once you have the skills, you have them forever. You don't have to apply more. We do a ton of trainings that are provided for free or at less cost. We try to make them very accessible for that reason, that this model is one that we want the whole world to know about, really. And it's portable because you travel with yourself everywhere. And so once you have these skills, you don't need anything. You don't need a book. You don't need to buy anything. It's all right there. So I came to know this model about 2.5 years ago, and I've been doing mental health work for close to 15 years now. And I was feeling just pretty, I guess the best word is downtrodden and saddened by my work in mental health, and feeling like people were continually needing to be regulated by coming to sessions every week, or they were relying on other people. And I would see short-term effects, but wouldn't see a lot of long-term changes, and was just feeling like maybe I didn't want to be a therapist anymore, that it wasn't what I should be doing. And I came across this model and instantly saw profound changes, not only in myself and the people that took the trainings with me, but in the students that I worked with and the people that I was doing mental health work with. Abilities to regulate themselves much faster, to have an understanding of how they can regulate themselves, and really have a lot of power over their responses. And so I feel like I've completely changed and feel like I'm 100% doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing now. This model also is not a standalone, so it fits into anything that you're already doing. Again, it can be just it can be standalone, or it can go with something. So for our SEL curriculums that we teach in schools, it's just another part of, it's kind of like what I would say is laying the foundation, and then you build the house around it, right? So all the other pieces that go together just help support this base layer work. So really quick, I would just like to know who's here on this call. And so if you could just answer these 3 questions, you can even number them 1, 2, and 3, who maybe who you are and what you do or why you're interested in this. It can be for yourself, for your community, for your work, whatever, for your children, for yourself. Maybe one thing that you want to set as a goal for yourself during this next 60 minutes that will help all of us have a thoughtful and productive time together. And then the third is what or who uplifts you or gives you strength, sustains you, or helps you through challenging times. And I'm sure that this is probably something that you've thought about during these past couple of months. So I'll just wait to see some things coming in. Hi, Heidi. Hi, Roger. Hi, Jenna. Great. Hi, Rosanna. Hi, Shannon. Blackfoot, Boise, Coeur d'Alene. Yeah, people definitely seeing acts of kindness demonstrated throughout the community is something that uplifts. I don't know full name. Graft, friends. Yes, family and friends for sure. Alone time, family time. Yes, completely. No interrupting, mute backgrounds. Thank you. Recognizing we are all in this together. Oh my goodness. Yes, huge. Oh, great. Wonderful. So Shannon is on her cell phone. It's not so easy for her to be writing in. Please don't write in. Um, but she's taking CRIM 2 for part 2 for healthcare workers. So if you go on the TRI website, you can see that there are a bunch of different opportunities online to take CRIM focused on different occupations. So yeah, getting outside, connecting with friends and family, but not always with more FaceTime or Zooms after a day full of work. Oh my goodness, yes. And a puppy, friends and family. Hi, Christina. Being in the garden, appreciating the simple things in life that we often overlook. Thank you so much. I'm going to please feel free to keep writing in, but thank you for sharing all of those things and for sharing what can create a thoughtful time for all of us. I'm sure that, you know, how we interact on Zoom and these different platforms is constantly changing. And I think that we're learning what that looks like to um, have thoughtful, productive time for ourselves. So, a couple of things you'll need today. You'll need some paper and a pen. You'll need a quiet space a couple of times that you can just focus on your central nervous system. And that's about it. So, resiliency has a ton of different definitions. And the definition that the Trauma Resource Institute and Elaine uses is resiliency is an individual and community's ability to identify and use individual and collective strengths in living fully in the present moment and to thrive while managing the activities of daily living. So I often say this is such a long definition of resiliency because in this model, when we talk about resiliency, we're talking about it both at the macro, meso, and micro levels, right? So we're talking about it as a large community wide, and we're also looking at it as individuals. Um, So the goals of this model are to help individuals learn to read their nervous systems and really become aware of these sensations that we have on the inside, whether they're distressing or pleasant, because when we can tell the difference, we can choose what we want to pay attention to. We also want to be able to intentionally use skills to return to a place of well-being. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Just a reminder, if you aren't muted, just double check yourself that you are. There's 6 key concepts, and I will actually go through all of them today, but in a very abbreviated fashion. And there are 6 skills, of which we'll go over 4 of them. So by the end of today, you should have a pretty good grasp on at least 3 of the skills and be able to take them away with you. I'm not going to go through this, but I just wanted to show this real world application and where it has been used. So it's used as a prevention, intervention, and postvention model. It can be used, again, across, because we all have nervous systems, it can be used across occupations, settings, etc. It was first developed as a postvention model, often with vets and their families, but is now being used widely after man-made and natural-made disasters. It's also has a lot of growing evidence. There's a lot of studies going on with it as well. So if anybody is interested and loves the research side of things, happy to be able to post this information for you. One of the big parts, so now I'm just going to kind of jump into the model. So one of the big things that's happening across the country and across the world, I would say, is that we are all having a lot of conversations about being trauma informed. There's a huge movement around we need to have trauma informed schools, we need to have trauma informed trainings, etc. So this model is not only a trauma-informed training, or today we will talk about being trauma-informed, but it goes one step beyond it. And Roger and I have talked about this a lot, and is something that I really value in the work that that you're doing, Roger, is this adding this resiliency-informed piece, which is something that I talk about constantly. So we move from this place of being conventional, people are bad, we need to, people are making these decisions because they're manipulative, and then moving more towards this way of what has happened with you so that we can better understand your story and meet you where you are. However, oftentimes that stops and we just stop at the question of what happened to you, right? And then that can often lead to continuing to play out a victim card with someone, or put them in that victim role, or, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to you. We can't possibly, expect you to meet these expectations, right? So we move one step further to the place of being resiliency informed, that people are resilient, that people can use, people can learn regulation skills, that everyone has this nervous system that is constantly ebbing and flowing and reacting. And so we want to say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry that this happened to you, or that something was, that you had a very challenging childhood, that you have these high ACE scores, etc. And what are your strengths and how can we build off those? So I often want to say and challenge people to say, yes, please become trauma informed, and let's go one step beyond that to become resiliency informed. So a big thing in the model that we teach is a resilient zone, okay? And this resilient zone is not a hunky-dory, I'm happy zone. It's the zone in which I feel like my best self. I can, the way that I explain it is I can be happy, sad, mad, frustrated, angry, sad, but I can handle it, right? So I'm not going to do anything in word, action, or deed to myself or anyone else that's going to be harmful. I think we all know that some days we have more narrow resilient zones and some days we have greater, wider resiliency zones. And so this just pertains to our capacity. So there's often people in our life that the second we see them or interact with them, our resiliency zone shrinks. There's also people in our life that increase our resiliency zone. With kids, I often say, did they have breakfast in the morning? Did they have a good night's sleep? What was their morning like walking out of the door in the morning, and that those can all affect this resiliency zone. So our goal with this model is to, I say, increase it this way, but also increase it in depth by learning the skills. And so the skills can either help us get back into our resiliency zone, and because of neurobiology and neuroplasticity, we'll talk about learning the skills can actually deepen our resiliency zone, which I think is one of the most hopeful parts of this whole model. And we often say it's an antidote to the ACEs because it works with neuroplasticity. So what can often happen, these great graphics here, is that we are rolling in our resilience zone and a stress or a trauma or a trigger comes along. And that can be a variety of things, right? So it can be just a stress that we have in our life, or it can be a traumatic event. And we can get bumped out into our zones, high or low. So when we get bumped into our high zone, this is often those times where we may lash out at someone, we become overly irritable, we experience a lot of anxiety, our pain tolerance is much lower, or we can bump out low where we want to isolate, we become not just sad, but sad to a point where we're having a hard time managing. So I always like to put myself out there because this is not like a human deficiency. This is just again, the way that our nervous system responds to stress or trauma. And this happens to everyone's nervous system. The way in which you respond is probably is going to look different person to person, but everyone experiences this. So my favorite thing is to have something happen. I get triggered by something. I bump out high. I may say something or do something that I feel really bad about. And then I'll dump into the low zone and want to isolate and feel really, really terrible, right? So maybe everybody could just take a second and you can just write down, if you care to be vulnerable, where you usually go. People are often, they bump high more regularly, or people will dump low more regularly. So what would you say that when you are triggered or have experienced something stressful, you go high or low? You can just type something in, even just an H or an L. Mm-hmm. Yep. High, freeze, dip, low. Yep. And so really just with these answers coming in, this isn't like, I'm not like, we don't want to bump people out of their zones as we're talking about it, but what it is just showing that we're human and that these are natural reactions, and that oftentimes we judge people, right? So we'll say something like, oh my gosh, they are so crazy, or oh my gosh, they're so out of control, or get it together, or calm down, right? All of these things that we say even just in passing to people, when in actuality, I'm curious if we changed the way that we spoke about people and said, wow, they really got bumped out of their zone today, or their nervous system is really getting triggered today, because this just happens to all of us. So just in talking about trauma, the way that the Trauma Resource Institute talks about trauma is we say it's either too much too fast, or too little or too much for too long. So in the case of neglect or abuse, too little or too much for too long, domestic violence situations, or too much too fast being a car accident, a natural disaster, things like that. Those are the things that really impact neurological changes and changes in how then our nervous system is able, on how our nervous system responses. Those can often mean that we get stuck in higher or lower zones. I'm sure all of you have examples of children who live in challenging situations, who either bump high or low, and they're in those zones for long periods of time because of their family settings. Come on. So one of the key parts of all of this is that perception is key. And so oftentimes, I'm sure everyone's heard this thing of why can't they just get over it, or it's not that big of a deal, right? And perception is the biggest part of trauma in general. It doesn't matter what you think about it or how traumatic or stressful you think it is. All it depends on is that person's nervous system. It has nothing to do with really what they think about it either. It's how their nervous system has responded to a stress or a trauma. So, okay, everybody, I would like you to, well, before I do this, the way that we think about the nervous system is that we call it the elegant design of the nervous system. And we often equate it to the laws of nature, which is when spring comes along and there's everything budding everywhere. We aren't like, wow, that tree must be so much happier now that it has flowers on it, right? That would be kind of a bizarre thing to say about a tree. Or in the middle of winter when it has shed all of its leaves and the leaves have died and gone to the ground and it's barren. We're never like, God, that tree must be so sad. You know, I can't believe that it lost all of its leaves. What is it going to do? No, the tree is going through its natural cycles, just like our central nervous system goes through natural cycles every day, in part because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to be flexible and move. So I would like everybody to stand up if you can at your desk. This is going to be exciting, right? I'll even do it with you. You can see my middle half of my body. And if you can, everyone reach over and unmute yourself. Or maybe Roger can just unmute everyone. Okay, now everyone, it's funny, I can see 3 people, so we'll see how this goes. I want everybody to run in place or jog or do some jumping jacks or something, okay? Now, what is happening to your heart rate? Going up. What's happening to your breathing? Come on, somebody else.
Breathing more
shallow. What's happening to your temperature? Warmer. Okay, now stop and sit down. Now, what's happening to your muscle tension? Is it increasing or decreasing? The legs felt that. Nice. Okay, so now that we've sat down, now what's happening is that your muscle tension should be reducing, right? If you felt a little increase in temperature, now your temperature is reducing or getting cooler, right? Your breathing you might take a big breath. It might be getting a little bit more deep, right? So you may even notice that you sweat a little bit, right? So what we just did was track our nervous system and it naturally responded. Nobody stood up and told their heart to beat faster. Nobody stood up and told them to breathe more shallow. Nobody said, I really need my legs to get more blood to them. And so could I stop digesting food right now? No, all of these things are supernatural. And that is the design of the central nervous system. So it revved up just then, right? Just like it does often when we go into those higher zones, fight, flight, freeze, things ramp up. And then as we come out of it, just like we're supposed to, it comes down on the other side of things, right? So we need our central nervous system to amp up and we need it to come back down. So there's nothing wrong with it increasing. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's the way that we are designed. It's our beautiful design of our nervous system. And we'll come back to that too. We'll come back to it in a variety of ways. So these are the 6 skills of CRIM. We talk about it too with kind of our hand being that tracking is in the middle, what we just did, paying attention to heartbeat, paying attention to temperature, breathing, muscle tension, all of those things. We're just tracking. And we're paying attention to whether we find them pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant. And I'll come back to why that is, but that's some of the language that we use. We then talk about resourcing, grounding, help now, shift and stay, and gesturing. So there's 6 skills and we do them on our hand, tracking being the base of all of them. And we always use tracking in conjunction with another skill. We're going to spend most of our time in what we call the basic 3, which are tracking, resourcing, and grounding. So we'll do that here. So when we talk about tracking, we're referring to paying attention to sensations, okay? So again, when we talk about sensations, we're talking about just those things that we notice happening on the inside. And the easiest way that we always start with tracking is about heartbeat, again, breathing, etc. All those kind of like basic ones. We often go to cognitive and talk about feelings at the beginning. And so I want to urge you to think about what we're going to be experiencing in the world of sensations. And we say, forget the F word, the feelings word, and go straight to sensations. I'll talk about why that's so important in a second. Okay. I want you to pick up one item that's on your desk in front of you. Okay. So I'm going to pick up this water bottle. And all I'm going to do right now is explain to you my water bottle in terms of sensation words. Okay. So you're going to practice this, but I'll go first and tell you. I'm not trying to get you to guess what this water bottle is. I'm just trying to use sensation words as I talk about it. So I'm going to say it's cool to the touch. It's heavy. It's smooth. It feels pleasant in my hand. And it's rounded. Okay. So I'm not saying anything about how I feel about the bottle or trying to get you to explain the bottle. This will make more sense. I promise you. Just practice with me. If you could put 2 sensation words in the chat about an item on your desk. Cool and smooth. Smooth and hot. Smells, nice smell, good. Light and bumpy, bendable, smooth, squeezy and oval, beautiful. These are all the right words, warm and smooth, exactly. Cool, smooth, smelling, right? So exactly, that's all perfect. So we're just paying attention to sensation words, okay? Cool, damp, exactly. So the reason for these pictures down here is I imagine that there's been some yard work happening in your world. I feel like everyone's yard looks really great where I live. I'm in Haley, Idaho, and it's been a lot of time spent out in the sunshine gardening. And so this analogy of if we water our weeds, they're going to grow, right? Now, I want to be really clear that I'm not talking about positive psychology here or think positively and things will be okay. There's a step missing in between that. But what I am saying is that when we do move our attention from the weeds or the places of distress or the places that are unpleasant and move more towards noticing what else is happening. I often say pivot. We still want to know that those weeds are there. That's fine. We're never going to get rid of all of them. There's no point in trying to think that we can, but we have a choice to pivot to something else, that something else is happening in the sensing in the same moment. So I'll just give you an example. My hands are really cold right now. I think it's because I'm nervous. And sometimes when I get nervous, my hands get really cold. I don't like being cold at all. It's one of the things I don't like. So I could sit here and fixate on how cold my hands are. And maybe somebody could put in the chat, do you think that my hands are going to get warmer or colder the more that I spend time just focusing on how cold my hands are? Colder. That's oftentimes what happens, okay? So in this moment, I can also choose to focus on that I'm actually sweating because I'm also nervous. So it actually feels much better to me in the center of my chest. I'm feeling pretty warm, actually. And so I notice that it actually takes my mind off of it. It doesn't take away that my hands are cold, but it makes them feel a little less cold. I don't know why. I don't really understand all of it, but that's kind of what happens. This model is often used widely with pain management as well because it has some of those similar components to it. Okay, so we're going to keep rolling. When we learn to discern the difference between sensations of distress and well-being, we have choice of what to pay attention to on the inside. Okay, so again, we're just beginning to notice that we have choices. We're not trying to change anything. We're not trying to ignore things or push them away. We're just recognizing that we have choices, that we can pivot to something else. I often use the language, what else is true? So tracking is noticing or paying attention to what's happening inside our body at the present moment. Sitting or staying with something that feels pleasant or neutral. And so we often say, what do you notice on the inside? Are the sensations pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? So one of the easiest ways to notice tracking of the nervous system and to sense sensations of well-being is through skill number 2. So again, tracking is always at the center. And our skill number 2 is called resourcing. So a resource is any person, place, thing, experience, memory. It can be real or imagined, that when you think about it, it brings you a sense of joy, calm, peace, strength, etc. So these can be things that are internal, that are part of you, right? Skills or traits that you hold dear to yourself that bring you a sense of power or strength or calm when you think about them. They can be places, maybe a special place in the mountains or a city that you really love. So what I'd like all of you to do right now with your piece of paper is to write down 3 resources. I'm going to suggest, if this is the first time you've learned about CRIM and resourcing, that you don't choose a person. And it's only because sometimes they get complicated. So I want everybody to experience this right away. So places are often really safe resources. So like a favorite experience that you've had going, a memory, a special place, a pet, etc. So I want everybody to write down 3 resources, meaning an animal, place, memory, experience, etc. Just write down 3 of them. And then I want you to just choose one, okay? Don't get bogged down in it being the best one or the right one. You're just going to choose one. So I'm going to give you just a really quick example of one of mine so you can hear how I would explain it. So I'm going to let you loose in a minute, and I'm going to have you like pretend that you're Bob Ross, and you're going to put in as many describing elements to your resource as possible. So sights, smells, tastes, temperatures, etc. So my place is it's a place that I love to lay on the grass right by Warm Springs Creek. And I can like feel, it's a hot summer day. I can feel the sunshine on my skin. I can hear the water. I love it when the wind moves through the trees and you can like hear that sound as it picks up. And I take a deep breath as I talk about it even. So I want you to just spend a couple minutes writing down as many details as you can about your resource. And as you do it, I want you to imagine. So you may be imagining.
Yeah, let me go. Yeah. this is really good. So